The needle on my gas gauge trembled just above empty, the red warning light casting a faint crimson glow across my dashboard. Outside, darkness pressed against my windshield like a living thing. Rain hammered against the glass with increasing fury, transforming the narrow mountain road ahead into a distorted, watery tunnel. Each sweep of my wipers provided only a momentary glimpse of clarity before the deluge reclaimed my vision. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white with tension. 6 hours I'd been driving through these forgotten back roads. My GPS signal lost somewhere in the mountains 3 hours back. What had started as a shortcut had become a nightmare of unmarked turns and deteriorating asphalt. The thunderstorm had appeared without warning, as if the mountains themselves had conjured it to trap me here. My headlights carved a pitiful path through the darkness, barely reaching 30 feet ahead before being swallowed by the night. The trees lining the road seemed to lean inward, their twisted branches reaching like arthritic fingers toward my vehicle. I hadn't passed another car in over 2 hours when the faint, sickly glow of a gas station sign materialized in the distance. I felt my chest loosen with relief. A strangled laugh escaped my throat, half joy, half hysteria. As I drew closer, the sign flickered erratically, letters buzzing in and out of existence. Something about its unsteady pulse made my relief curdle into unease. I slowed as I approached the turnoff. The station appeared ancient, a relic from another era. Its weather-clabbered siding had once been white, but had faded to the color of old bones. Black patches of mold spread across the walls like bruises. The windows of the attached convenience store were clouded with decades of grime, allowing only the faintest suggestion of light from within. But my options had dwindled to nothing. The gas gauge now rested directly on empty. I turned off the highway. The crunch of gravel beneath my tires seemed unnaturally loud as I pulled up to a rusted pump. I cut the engine, and a profound silence descended, broken only by the steady drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional low rumble of distant thunder. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m., its green digits the brightest thing in sight. I sat motionless for several long minutes, studying the station through the rain-streaked windshield. No cars were parked in the cracked concrete lot. No lights illuminated the area around the pumps. Only a single fluorescent tube flickered spasmodically inside the store, creating a strobe-like effect that sent shadows dancing across the interior. "Hello," I called out weakly as I finally stepped from the car, my voice immediately stolen by the wind. The rain was icy, instantly soaking through my thin jacket and plastering my hair to my scalp. Each cold droplet felt deliberate, accusatory. The pump was an ancient model with analog dials and a manual handle, nothing like the digital displays I was accustomed to in the city. I tugged at the nozzle, but it remained firmly locked in its cradle. Of course, I needed to pay first. I sighed, pulling my useless jacket tighter and steeling myself for the dash to the store entrance. Each step through the darkness felt wrong somehow, as if the ground beneath my feet was subtly shifting, attempting to redirect my path. The distance to the door seemed to stretch impossibly. When I finally reached it, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle. Through the grimy glass, I could make out cluttered shelves and the stuttering light that cast the interior in sickly pallor. Something primal in me screamed to return to my car, to try to make it to the next town on fumes. But rationality won out. I couldn't risk being stranded on that lonely road. I pushed open the door. It moved with surprising resistance, as if reluctant to admit me. A bell overhead produced a discordant jingle, the sound dying unnaturally quickly in the stale air. The smell hit me immediately, a complex miasma of rot and chemical sweetness. Beneath it lurked something else, something earthy and primitive that reminded me of freshly turned soil in a graveyard. "Hello." My voice sounded muffled, as if the very air absorbed the sound. "Anyone working tonight?" The store's interior revealed decades of neglect. Dust-caked shelves lined the walls, stocked with faded packages and dented cans bearing designs I hadn't seen since childhood. Nothing looked like it had been touched in years, yet there was no dust on the floor. The linoleum was worn but clean, as if recently swept. Refrigerator units lined the back wall, their motors humming at slightly different pitches, creating a discordant drone that set my teeth on edge. The glass doors were fogged with condensation, obscuring whatever lay within. I noticed that several of the ceiling tiles were stained dark brown, sagging under the weight of ancient water damage. I approached the counter with measured steps. An antique brass register sat atop the scratched surface, its keys worn smooth by countless fingers. Beside it perched a small silver service bell. I stared at it for several long moments, suddenly certain that ringing it would be irreversible somehow. My heartbeat accelerated as I extended my finger. The metal was unexpectedly cold against my skin as I pressed down. Ding! The sound hung in the air, impossibly resonant in the cluttered space. I counted my heartbeats while I waited. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing stirred. My eyes drifted to a door behind the counter marked "Employees Only." Its surface was marred by deep scratches, as if something had repeatedly tried to claw its way through, either in or out. I tapped the bell again, harder this time. Ding! Just a moment. A voice whispered from somewhere behind the counter. The words stretched and distorted like a damaged recording played at reduced speed. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The voice was dry and raspy, as if its owner's vocal cords had atrophied from disuse, yet were suddenly forced into service. Behind the "Employees Only" door came sounds of movement. Slow, deliberate footsteps dragged across the floor, accompanied by a wet, sliding noise I couldn't identify. When the door finally began to open, it did so with excruciating slowness, its hinges releasing a prolonged whine that raised the hair on the back of my neck. Darkness greeted me from the open doorway, a darkness deeper and more absolute than seemed possible. After several seconds, something began to emerge from that perfect blackness. First came the hands, appearing at the edge of the counter, fingers unnaturally elongated, joints swollen and bulbous, nails yellowed and curved like talons. The skin was mottled with age spots and hung loosely, as if there wasn't quite enough flesh to cover the bones beneath. "Need gas?" the attendant asked, still mostly concealed in shadow. The words emerged with effort, each syllable separate and distinct, as if human speech were an almost forgotten skill. "Yes, please," I managed to reply, my mouth suddenly dry as cotton. I fumbled for my wallet, grateful for the excuse to look away from those hands. "Tank's almost empty. How much for a fill-up?" "We don't take money," the voice replied, closer now. "Not anymore." My head jerked up involuntarily. For a brief, terrible moment, the fluorescent light steadied, illuminating the figure before me with stark clarity. What stood behind the counter couldn't properly be called human, at least not anymore. The gray, papery skin of its face hung in loose folds, like a suit several sizes too large. Deep crevices ran from sunken cheeks to the corners of a mouth that seemed too wide for its face. But it was the eyes that caused my heart to stutter in my chest. Milky white orbs without pupil or iris, yet somehow focused intently on me with terrible awareness. "Then what do you take?" The question escaped my lips before I could stop it. The thing's mouth stretched horizontally, splitting its face in a grotesque parody of a smile. Blackened teeth emerged from gray gums, jagged and uneven like shattered pottery. "Company," it whispered, the words somehow both sibilant and guttural. "We just need company. It gets so quiet here." The light flickered rapidly, and in that strobe-like effect, the attendant seemed to shift position with each flash, drawing incrementally closer without ever appearing to move. Then darkness fell for a prolonged second, and when the light returned, the space behind the counter was empty. "Pump's ready," the voice whispered directly into my ear, though nothing stood beside me. I stumbled backward, my spine colliding painfully with the shelf, sending dusty packages clattering to the floor. My breathing came in short, sharp gasps as my eyes darted frantically around the empty store. With no conscious decision, I found myself backing toward the exit, nearly tripping over my own trembling legs. I burst through the door into the night air. The rain had stopped completely, not gradually, but entirely, as if a switch had been flipped. The world outside was wrapped in an unnatural silence, no wind, No distant traffic, not even the sound of insects. The air felt thick and resistant, like moving through invisible syrup. My car waited by the pump, exactly where I'd left it. Yet something was subtly, horribly wrong. It looked weathered. The once shiny paint appeared faded and chipped. A thin layer of dust coated the windows. A delicate tendril of ivy had begun to creep up one tire. As I approached on leaden legs, I noticed the pump's nozzle was already inserted into my gas tank. I had not done that. I absolutely had not done that. I reached for the driver's door handle with a trembling hand. The metal felt wrong against my skin, not cold, but room temperature, as if the car had been sitting there for days rather than minutes. Movement in my peripheral vision made me turn. Behind the station, barely visible in the dim glow of the sputtering sign, stood a line of vehicles, dozens of them, arranged in neat, concentric rows, extending far beyond what should have been possible given the size of the property. Each vehicle was in a different state of decay. Some were little more than rusted frames, their seats rotted away to springs, windows long since shattered. Others appeared more recent, 1980s sedans consumed by rust, 1990s SUVs with flattened tires, early 2000s models covered in thick layers of dust and dead leaves. A few looked disturbingly new, save for the empty driver's seats and dark stains on the upholstery. The realization crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't the first time the attendant had asked for company. With frantic movements, I yanked open my car door and threw myself inside, jabbing the key into the ignition with shaking hands. The engine turned over once, a labored, grinding sound, then again with diminishing strength, before dying with a sputtering cough. "No, no, no," I muttered, twisting the key again and again. Nothing, not even a click, just dead, oppressive silence. My eyes fell to the gas gauge. The needle hadn't moved. It still hovered just above empty, mocking my desperation. A soft tapping on my window made me cry out in shock. I turned slowly, already knowing what I would see. The attendant stood there, impossibly tall and thin now that it was fully revealed, those elongated fingers gently drumming against the glass. Its body seemed wrong, joints bent at unnatural angles, torso too long, neck craned forward like a vulture's. "Car trouble?" it asked, voice somehow perfectly audible through the closed window, as if it spoke directly inside my head. "Don't worry, it happens to everyone who stops here." The thing's face split into that terrible smile again, wider this time, stretching literally from ear to ear, revealing row upon row of those broken, blackened teeth. "We have a room for you inside. For all of you. You'll never need to leave again." As it spoke, I became aware of movement all around the station. Figures were emerging from the shadows, from behind the pumps, from beneath the parked cars, from the darkened corners of the property. Dozens of them shuffling forward with jerky, uncoordinated movements, all with that same gray, loose skin, all with those vacant white eyes. They surrounded my car now, pressing against the windows, their breath fogging the glass. Some wore tattered remnants of clothing from decades past. Others were dressed in more modern attire, though stained and rotting. Their faces bore the same expression, a hollow longing, an eternal hunger. And with horrifying clarity, I understood. These were the drivers who had stopped here before me. Those who had needed gas on this forgotten road. Those who had sought help in the night. Those who had provided company. The attendant's face pressed against my window, flattening grotesquely against the glass. That stretched grin, now mere inches from my face. I could see that its teeth weren't black. They were coated with dark, flaking material that could only be dried blood. "Welcome," it whispered, its breath somehow fogging my window from the outside, the condensation forming words that mirrored its speech. "To the last stop." From behind, cold, damp fingers closed around my shoulders with surprising strength. I hadn't heard my back door open. I hadn't heard anything at all. As I was pulled backward into the darkness of my own car, I caught a final glimpse of the station sign, now fully illuminated in the darkness. The letters rearranged themselves as I watched, settling into a new configuration. Last Chance Gas, serving travelers since 1952. And beneath it, and smaller lettering that seemed to write itself as I stared. No one ever leaves on empty. The last thing I felt was dozens of cold hands touching my face, my arms, my chest. Not violent, but possessive, claiming. The last thing I heard was a chorus of dry, whispering voices. Stay with us. Keep us company. Forever. And I knew, with the last traces of my fading consciousness, that I would. That I already belonged to this place. That perhaps I always had. That this lonely road had been leading me here all along. To this final, inescapable destination. To the last stop anyone ever makes. Dear listener, thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. Many more terrifying, mysterious, and thrilling stories are coming soon. See you again very soon.